Good afternoon. I'm Breon, the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of New York. I want to thank you all for being here with us this afternoon, both here in person and online. With me today are Milgram, Administrator for the Drug Enforcement Administration, Ricky Patel, Acting Special Agent in Charge, Homeland Security Investigations New York Office. From the New York Field Office of the FBI, we have Michael Driscoll, Assistant Director in Charge. From the NYPD, we have Captain Thomas Kelly, who's here. He's the Commanding Officer of the Drug Enforcement Task Force. We have Chief Marshal Vincent DeMarco. From the United States Marshal Service, Captain Michael Sumnick from New York State Police. And we also have our prosecutors here, AUSAs Jillian Kasner, Tara McGrath, Sarita Komatareddy, and our paralegal, Sophia Cronin. We are here today to announce the extradition from Colombia of one of the most dangerous, most wanted drug kingpins in the world, Dairo Antonio Úsuga David, also known as Otoniel, to whom murder was meaningless and violence the ultimate currency. For the last decade, Úsuga David has been the principal leader of the Clan del Golfo, or CDG, the most powerful paramilitary and drug trafficking cartel in Colombia. He is responsible for trafficking vast amounts of cocaine, measured in tons, not pounds or kilograms. He earned enormous profits, measured in billions, not millions. He oversaw an army of henchmen who murdered, kidnapped, and tortured victims, including Colombian law enforcement and military personnel. He did this to maintain control of the cartel and the regions where it operates. His direct orders to his thousands of military-clad followers sent a ripple effect of drugs, death, and destruction to every community his cocaine shipments touched, from Colombia to right here in the Eastern District of New York. Today, he will finally face justice in a federal courtroom right here in Brooklyn for charges based on his role as the supreme leader of the cartel. Úsuga David is charged in a 3-count superseding indictment with leading a continuing criminal enterprise from June 2003 through October 2021, and participating in an international conspiracy to manufacture and distribute cocaine, knowing and intending that the drugs would be illegally imported into the United States. Those are the charges, and the details about Úsuga David and his lethal organization are chilling. So the CDG is one of the largest distributors of cocaine in the world, also known as Los Urabeños, or Clan Úsuga. They are based in the Urabá region of Antioquia, Colombia, with an army of thousands of members. At its peak, we estimate around 6,000. To put that in perspective, he had more employees than the Boston and Miami police departments combined. On the screen, you see a map of Colombia and a corridor of countries ultimately leading to the United States. In red, you can see the expansive territory under CDG control, much of which consisted of coastline. Within the territory under CDG control, you can see the Antioquia region, which served as the CDG's base. You can see the Gulf of Úsuga and 3 important port cities along the Pacific Ocean to the left and the Caribbean Sea to the right. You can see that the CDG territory is in the northwest part of the country, in closer proximity to the United States, and that these port cities provided direct access to waterways from which vessels could depart. And by the blue dotted lines, you can see some of the cocaine export routes departing from these areas that the CDG utilized to smuggle drugs into the United States. Úsuga David's cartel imported outrageous quantities of cocaine into the United States. The indictment charges more than 40 instances, 40, where his cartel exported a ton or more of cocaine from Colombia. The CDG exports and coordinates the production, purchase, and transfer of weekly multi-ton shipments of cocaine from Colombia into Central America and Mexico for ultimate importation into the United States. Law enforcement has intercepted some of these shipments, including over 10 tons of cocaine seized on boats off the coast of Panama and within a jungle region in Colombia. As a high-ranking leader of the CDG since its inception and its CEO for the past decade, Úsuga David directed his army to commit brutal acts of violence, terror, and retaliation, to exert control over vast territorial regions of Colombia and its people, and to export staggering quantities of cocaine destined for the United States. This was incredibly lucrative for him and earned him and his cartel billions in drug proceeds. The illicit drugs that were sent to the United States caused addiction, violence, and death, and tragically eroded the quality of life for residents of the communities affected, including within the greater New York City area and the nation more broadly. The CDG's drug trafficking activities funded and enabled Úsuga David's rise to power. And the CDG used military tactics and weapons to control the most lucrative cocaine trafficking region within Colombia. His paramilitary organization, thousands of soldiers, including sicarios or hitmen as they're called, murdered, assaulted, kidnapped, and tortured and assassinated at Úsuga David's direction. And the CDG imposed a tax on any drug traffickers operating in its territory, charging fees for every kilogram of cocaine manufactured, stored, or transported through the region. Úsuga David's violence included public demonstrations of its power and repression of innocent civilians. He imposed mandatory shutdowns or strikes, a kind of martial law where he ordered that all businesses in CDG-controlled territory remain closed, and Colombian citizens within those regions had to remain at home. He ordered CDG soldiers to execute anyone who disobeyed the shutdown's rules. At his direction, the CDG carried out organized campaigns which they called Plan Pistolas to kill Colombian law enforcement and military personnel using military-grade weapons, including grenades, explosives, and assault rifles, and to assassinate individuals who they believed to be cooperating with law enforcement. On numerous occasions, Úsuga David personally ordered the murder and torture of individuals deemed to be enemies of the CDG. For years, Úsuga David evaded capture by moving through a web of rural safe houses in the jungles of Colombia and avoiding modern technology. He was, in essence, living off the grid. At the same time, with an army of ruthless sicarios at his command, Úsuga David was able to expand the CDG's territory and power. He believed he was essentially untouchable. Until now. Úsuga David's capture was the result of an extensive joint campaign by the Colombian National Police, Colombian Air Force, and National Army of Colombia that began in 2016. Prior to Úsuga David's arrest, the Colombian government offered an $800,000 reward for information regarding his whereabouts, and the United States offered a $5 million bounty for information leading to his arrest. He was ultimately captured on October 23rd, 2021, in a rural hideout in Antioquia province, Colombia, near the Colombia-Panama border. And that was following an operation that involved 500 soldiers and 22 helicopters. President Iván Duque of Colombia described the operation as, quote, the biggest penetration of the jungle ever seen in the military history of our country, end quote. Now, a case like this one requires an army of its own, and I'm grateful to the work of my office and our partners for putting an end to Úsuga David's reign of terror and giving hope to the people of Colombia for a better and safer future. To the people of Colombia, we are committed to seeking the truth about Úsuga David's crimes and those who helped him. We want to ensure that they face the consequences for those crimes. And we're committed to recovering ill-gotten gains to return to the victims and their families. I'd like to give a special thanks to the DEA, HSI, NYPD, and FBI agents who worked tirelessly on this case over many, many years. And I want to thank the United States Marshal Service for taking the lead in ensuring that the defendant is held securely and safely in this district while he awaits trial. I'd also like to extend my deep gratitude to the President of Colombia, the Colombian Attorney General's Office, the Colombian National Police, the Ministry of National Defense, Ministry of Justice, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Republic of Colombia and its law enforcement officers have risked and too often lost lives in the pursuit of this evildoer. And the Colombian people have suffered greatly at the hands of Úsuga David and the CDG. We will honor their sacrifice and honor Colombia's commitment to combat narco-trafficking by pursuing justice in this case for the victims and their families. I'd also like to acknowledge the tremendous work done by the Department of Justice's Office of International Affairs and the Criminal Division's Narcotic and Dangerous Drugs Section, judicial attachés in Bogota, Colombia, and their Special Operation Division trial attorneys. And finally, I'd like to thank the United States Attorney's offices in the Southern District of Florida, the Middle District of Florida, the Eastern District of Texas, and the Southern District of New York for collaborating with us in this case. Prosecutors from those offices have demonstrated extraordinary professionalism and dedication by offering their assistance in furtherance of the case here in the Eastern District of New York. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to DEA Administrator Ann Milgram.
Good afternoon. The charges against Otoniel should send a clear message to the leaders of drug cartels around the world. If you traffic deadly poison, if you use violence and fear to gain power, if you target law enforcement, if you destabilize countries for your profit, and if you run a drug cartel that harms the safety, health, and security of the American people, then the Drug Enforcement Administration will stop at nothing to bring you to justice. The United States is today in the midst of a devastating and unprecedented overdose epidemic. An American is dying every 5 minutes in our country. International drug cartels are responsible for the vast majority of drugs on our streets today. 90% of all cocaine in the United States of America comes from Colombia. So DEA is proud to announce, in partnership with the U.S. attorneys and with our federal, state, and local law enforcement partners, that today we are bringing Dairo Antonio Úsuga David, known as Otoniel, to justice. Otoniel is charged with being the leader of the Clan de Golfo drug cartel. That is the largest drug cartel that is operating in Colombia. It has coordinated the production, the sale, the transfer of multi-ton shipments of cocaine from Colombia to Mexico and to Central America, all of which has a destination of the United States. Its 4,000 plus members use violence and intimidation, including deliberately targeting and attacking members of Colombian law enforcement to maintain their control over the Colombian cocaine trade. The Clan de Golfo has aligned themselves with the two largest criminal drug networks in Mexico, the Sinaloa Cartel and CJNG. Those are the two most significant cartels in Mexico, and those are the two cartels that are today responsible for the vast majority of fentanyl that is flooding into the United States. The Clan de Golfo's cocaine is frequently mixed with the Mexican cartel's fentanyl, creating a deadly combination that is killing Americans. The indictment alleges that between the years of 2003 and 2021, the Clan de Golfo cartel attempted to import over 90,000 kilograms of cocaine into the United States. And to give you a sense of the scale of that amount of cocaine, the DEA estimates that the street value of 90,000 kilos of cocaine today is over $2 billion United States dollars. Cases like this are made because of the drive, the tenacity, and the diligence of the incredible men and women of the DEA and of our federal, state, and local law enforcement partners. DEA special agents, intelligence analysts, and task force officers in dozens of offices across the United States and the world have worked together and contributed to this investigation. I am also deeply grateful to the Colombian National Police Sensitive Investigative Unit and to other Colombian law enforcement partners, military partners, and prosecution partners, as well as to Interpol for their incredible collaboration on this case. I also want to thank the U.S. Attorney here, Breon Peace, and the U.S. Attorney's Office for their exceptional work on this prosecution. We are also grateful to the Department of Justice's Office of International Affairs for their assistance with the extradition. At DEA, our work in Colombia to dismantle the Clan de Golfo cartel carries on. This case is a part of that effort. And in just the last year, we have made over 115 arrests. We have seized hundreds of weapons and tens of thousands of kilos of cocaine. Today's extradition should send a clear message to leaders of drug cartels all over the world. The DEA will relentlessly pursue anyone, a local street drug dealer, a money launderer, or the head of an international criminal drug cartel who threatens the safety, the health, and the security of the American people. Thank you. It's now my privilege to turn it over to our partner at HSI, Ricky Patel.
Good afternoon. My name is Ricky Patel. I'm the Acting Special Agent in charge for Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, here in New York. This morning, Dairo Antonio Úsuga David, also known as Otoniel, woke up in a jail cell in New York City. The same city where he flooded large amounts of cocaine onto our streets. As the alleged leader of the Clan del Golfo, or CDG cartel group, drug cartel group, this complex investigation spanned years and focused on the CDG, a paramilitary group widely known as one of the most powerful international drug trafficking organizations in the world. The CDG's dominance in Colombia has facilitated the exportation and international distribution of illicit narcotics on a global scale. From South America to Central America, Mexico, and ultimately the United States and Europe. Today and every day, HSI special agents fulfill our sworn duty to ensure national, border, and economic security. We cannot and will not stand idly by as transnational criminal organizations target our citizens as a means to profit, with blatant disregard for the health and safety of our citizens. Drug traffickers pretend to be fearless individuals, but the one thing they're all fearful of is the long arm of the United States government. That was clearly demonstrated yesterday when Otoniel took a one-way flight from Columbia to John F. Kennedy International Airport to answer for his heinous crimes. His face said it all. Not happy to be visiting this great city, he walked off the jet as a defeated man. And rightfully so, as alleged, his sicarios, or hitmen, murdered and kidnapped for years on his behalf. They should be nervous too. Our work does not stop today. We all know too well that tackling this complex threat involves a united, comprehensive strategy and an aggressive approach by multiple entities across all forms of government. HSI special agents remain committed to protecting the homeland by investigating and bringing to justice those criminal networks who seek to flood our streets with poison while financially benefiting from those ravaged by addiction. To the individual that attempts to take over as the leader of the CDG cartel, know this: we have a jail cell waiting right for you, right next to Otoniel, and you've been warned. Large investigations such as this one take a team effort. I stand in solidarity with our partners here and afar, especially Mr. Breon, the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of New York, the United States Marshal Service, the DEA, the FBI, the NYPD, and the New York State Police. It's my honor to introduce Mike Driscoll with the FBI.
Good afternoon. Thanks everyone for joining us today. As you can tell from the number of people standing up here, this is an important case to us, and it's one that takes a team to accomplish. Úsuga David, otherwise known as Otoniel, had a long run as the leader of the Clan de Golfo, or CDG. His paramilitary organization, believed to be one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the world, and not to mention one of the most violent. CDG was arguably one of the largest distributors of cocaine, much of which made its way through Central America and Mexico, ultimately ending up in our neighborhoods and on the streets of the cities we live in. The CDG's army was unmerciful in their reign of violence, and their victims included competitors, rivals, witnesses, civilians, law enforcement, and military personnel, just to name a few. Otoniel was captured by Colombian military and law enforcement personnel in the jungles of Colombia last year, and after much planning and coordination, and I want to emphasize that coordination, bringing somebody like this back to the United States is no small feat. He was brought back to New York, and he will now face the American criminal justice system to ensure he's tried for these alleged crimes. And as I mentioned earlier, it takes a tremendous amount of cooperation and coordination to pull something like this off. I want to thank the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District and his team, Breon, the DEA Administrator, and Milgram, HSI's Acting Special Agent in Charge, Rick Patel, the NYPD Drug Enforcement Task Force, New York State Police, the U.S. Marshals, the Justice Department's Office of International Affairs, as well as their Criminal Division's Narcotics and Dangerous Drug Section Judicial Attachés, the government of Colombia, the people of Colombia, and my own team here on the FBI that deals with transnational criminal enterprises. The work they do addresses some of our most important threats, and they deal, as in this case, with some of our most dangerous subjects. So I want to thank everyone for their hard work in finally bringing this individual to justice. Thank you.
We'll take a few questions.
Before the extradition of Otoniel, there was a big debate in Colombia on whether or not Colombian authorities will be able throughout this process to access defendants in order for them to be able to advance with their own investigation. So I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about cooperation with Colombian authorities and whether or not they will be able to advance with their own investigations as how the Otoniel is doing work.
Yes, I would say, as each of the speakers have said before, we had great cooperation from our colleagues in Colombia, and we thank them for all that they've done to facilitate this extradition. In terms of your question about cooperation and access, I think we will continue to cooperate with authorities in Colombia with respect to our investigation, with respect to Otoniel, Úsuga David, but also more broadly with respect to other drug traffickers and members of the CDG. I won't get into specifics about exactly what that will look like going forward, but you can rest assured that we continue to partner with them more broadly on our efforts to combat drug trafficking.
How big a part does he play in the drug city? How is cocaine taken off?
So I will say that he played a big role. He was the leader. As we said, he was the CEO of the CDG and commanded thousands of members of that organization in connection with drug trafficking activity. So played the lead role in our view. I'll defer to my colleague Ann Milgram if there's anything further to talk about post arrest of Otoniel. But one second. No worries. But the fight continues. The trafficking, unfortunately, continues. CDG and Mr. Úsuga David, of course, are not the only ones who are seeking to traffic drugs into our country, and we will be continuing to combat that. Well, New York, yeah, and I can't quantify the amounts of cocaine that he trafficked that ended up in New York. What I can say, and you see this in the superseding indictment, he was responsible for multi-ton shipments of cocaine into the United States. New York is one of the largest drug markets, unfortunately, in the country. So our expectation is that those drugs, many of which landed on the streets of New York as well. I don't know. Okay.
I have a question about, you mentioned that you're going to keep working, and of course, as you mentioned that he was working with the Cartel Operations in Mexico and Sinaloa to expand their business. How corruption is part of this in terms of government involved in the possibility of using the country? We know that he had routes to Venezuela, and we understand, and I don't know if any contact with the Cartel Driscoll in that area. And then the second part of my question is on the terms of fentanyl. You mentioned that he was involved with these cartels that are bringing other drugs that are terrible for the country, and that we have a crisis on that sense. How was he working on that end? Because most of the commerce he was doing was in cocaine. Was he partnering to try to expand the business, to try to get into that business as well?
Let me first, to answer the first question, I'm not going to go beyond the allegations in the indictment and the remarks that we have made earlier during this conference. I will say, as you can imagine, that this office and our law enforcement partners here obviously investigate these crimes, and to the extent there is corruption involved, we have no hesitancy to go after corrupt officials as well. We do not allege in connection with this indictment allegations against any corrupt government officials. I'll turn it over to DEA Administrator Milgram for the second question.
I'll speak generally, not as to this specific case. What we see frequently right now is that there are a number of different organizations that are pushing drugs, whether it's cocaine or other drugs, to and through the lead Mexican cartels, the Sinaloa cartel and CJNG. And so today in the United States, it is very polydrug, is what we would call it. So often our seizures after drugs have come into the United States are bulk seizures of things like cocaine, fentanyl powder, methamphetamine powder, and fake counterfeit pills. We know that more than 90% of that cocaine is coming into the U.S. from Colombia, but it often moves through those lead cartels, the most significant major cartels in Mexico that are primarily themselves mass-producing fentanyl and methamphetamine.
Just a quick follow-up. One of the biggest problems lately has been these cases of people using cocaine thinking that they're using cocaine, but they're
That's right.
being raised with fentanyl.
Yeah.
So that's what you're kind of mentioning on this.
So one of the things we did very recently was we put out an alert from DEA to local law enforcement to tell them that we had seen significant clusters. We called them overdose clusters across the United States, which was cocaine that was overwhelmingly being sold to people as cocaine that was in fact laced with fentanyl, or in one instance it was pure fentanyl. We saw in about 6 weeks' time 58 overdoses, 29 deaths as a result of it. Again, I can't tell you specifically whether that cocaine in each of those came from Clan de Golfo. What I can tell you is that over 90% of it does. And we do have a tracing program where we trace it back to know for certain, but that process is ongoing.
Thanks. Driscoll and Reuters. On the subject of continued cooperation with Colombian authorities, Gustavo Petro, the presidential candidate in Colombia, came out. He was somewhat critical of this extradition this morning for reasons largely in line with what my colleague mentioned in the first question. So have you or anyone in DOJ been in touch with the candidate or his team, and would you expect such cooperation to continue if he's elected?
I'm not going to comment on political matters. As I said, generally, I think we have a good cooperative relationship with the government of Colombia. I would expect that to continue.
So, you talk about violence in Colombia. I was wondering if you could bring any direct instances of violence here in New York or inside the U.S. Here's a statistic suggests that kidnapping, smuggling, even sex abuse by the suspect. And if you have on that, and then in Milgram, you've seen Honduran President Gordon, you've seen El Chapo in recent years. Who's the next big target? Who's trafficker number one? Who's the most aggressive?
So on your first question, we don't allege any specific acts of violence or murders or anything like that occurring in New York or in the United States. That's not included in the indictment. We do talk about, as you saw, the many acts of violence, murders, tortures, etc., that we allege that Úsuga David is responsible for. I'll turn it over to Administrator Milgram.
So we are obviously, we work worldwide, and the number one priority is essentially saving lives right now. And so DEA's mission in many ways is the same as it's always been, which is to protect the safety, health, and security of the American people. But we are at an extraordinary moment in time. You know, as I tell our team, we have 107,000 reasons to do the work that we do, because that's how many Americans have died in the past year. 66% of that is fentanyl, 30% is stimulants, cocaine, methamphetamine. And so we are tracking worldwide this exact problem. And that means we go from mainland China, where they are manufacturing precursor chemicals that are being shipped directly to the Sinaloa and the CJ and G cartels in Mexico, who are mass producing counterfeit fake prescription pills, fentanyl powder, and methamphetamine powder. And so it is going from mainland China to Mexico to Main Street, USA, where we are seeing countless unprecedented numbers of overdoses and overdose deaths. So that is priority number one. Related to that is, of course, what we see in our communities, which are, in addition to the increase in overdose deaths, increases in drug-related violence. So we are working across the United States on addressing those two things. But every single day the question is, how do we reverse this horrific trend of overdose deaths that we're seeing? Not today. Not today.
I'll let you want to start.
So one of the things we're very focused on right now at DEA is that historically we have focused on the leaders of the major international cartels. I want to be very clear that that's not what has been happening here. This has been, I noted that there have been 115 arrests in the past year, as well as multiple seizures. The goal is to dismantle this entire operation. So it is incredibly significant that the leader and really the founder of the Clan de Golfo is now in custody and will face justice. But as I think the U.S. Attorney can speak to, there are many others who are part of these prosecutions, and our investigations and our work continues, again, with the goal of dismantling the networks and not just the high-value targets.
I think that's the last. I just want to add to that, for our interests here, violated federal law. Our priority is to keep the people of the Eastern District of New York, the people of the nation, safe. And when you have trafficking of drugs, of course, into the United States, into the Eastern District of New York, there's all kinds of harm that comes from that to the people here. So our interest is to hold people accountable and to send the message that no one is above the law. And it's particularly important to go after those who are responsible for these large organizations who are peddling in these drugs that are causing so much damage. So I agree with Administrator Milgram. We're trying to take out the entire organization. And it's impactful when you can do that and take out the top. That's it.
Thank you, everybody.
Because we get the fire and the